Well, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker. Charles Fishman is an award-winning investigative journalist, a New York Times best-selling author, and he spent the last 4 years traveling around the world exploring water issues. He recently released the book that you've seen us giving out tonight that will be on sale from Book People, and hopefully you can ask him to sign copies of it, The Big Thirst. It's been widely praised by various sources, including the Washington Post, Science Journal, Nature, for its captivating storytelling and its incisive explanation of water and water issues and our rapidly changing relationship to water. As I said earlier, I've downloaded it on my iPad. It's excellent, is packed with statistics and information, and yet is a fun, quick read. Very well explained for the layperson. As a reporter, Charles Fishman has tried to get inside organizations, both familiar and secret, and explain how they work. In the course of reporting about water to write The Big Thirst, he stood at the bottom of a 500,000-gallon sewage tank. No, it was not full. Sampled water directly from the springs in San Pellegrino, and I learned last night from him that he actually can tell you where the carbonation in San Pellegrino comes from, but that's a secret. You'll have to ask him. Carried water on his head for 3 kilometers with a group of Indian villagers. He does a great deal in order to obtain the information for his stories. He received his bachelor's degree from Harvard University. He's a former Metro and national reporter for the Washington Post. I also learned that he took a leave of absence from the Washington Post at one point in order to work on a tugboat in New Orleans. He said it was the worst job in the world. Better to write about water than to work on top of it. But he was called back to the Washington Post for a very major event in many of our lives. We all remember where we were, when President John F. Kennedy died? When the Challenger exploded. It was that second one that he was called back to the Post to report on, and along with 5 other investigative reporters, worked on getting the stories out to us as that tragedy unfolded. Well, I said we'd come back to it. Remember, I told you we talked about Steve Robichon, worked on the space shuttle, the Challenger exploded. Yep, we're getting some connections here. Okay, so in 1996, Charles Fishman began working for the innovative business magazine Fast Company, and he's won numerous awards since then, including 3 times, receiving UCLA's Gerald Loeb Award, which is the most prestigious award in business journalism. In addition to The Big Thirst, he has written the best-selling book, The Walmart Effect. We're very, very fortunate to have him joining us today. Please join me in welcoming Charles Fishman.
Before I launch into my 4-hour speech, why doesn't everybody who wants to just stand up, stretch, take a deep breath, whatever you need to do. Okay, when you guys are ready, I'm ready. can't get home to your nice hot shower until you hear this one last presentation. Plus, there is the toilet giveaway. Don't forget about that. This is the only event I've ever been at where they are giving away a toilet. A man recently came up to me at a water conference where I spoke afterwards, and he said, "Can I tell you a story about water?" Well, that's actually the business I'm in. I'm in the water storytelling business. We're supposed to get that out of the way. Okay. I'm in the water storytelling business, but you'd be amazed how rarely anybody actually offers a story. So I said, "Please, tell me a story about water." And this fellow said, he told me the following story. He said, you know what, why don't we take this one off? I think we're getting double miking here. Hang on one second. You take that. There you go. Okay, we'll be better off that way. He said to me, until just recently, I was a pilot flying F-16s on and off the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk. The USS Kitty Hawk was the last diesel-powered aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy fleet. He said, and part of our job as F-16 pilots was to clean our planes with fresh water every single week. Sea air, salt water, and high-performance jet aircraft don't get along that well. But because the Kitty Hawk was a diesel-powered aircraft carrier, it had to burn diesel fuel to make fresh water. In fact, the Kitty Hawk had a crew of 5,700 people. So you're burning a lot of diesel fuel every single day to make enough fresh water for almost 6,000 people. That, in fact, is where the term Navy shower comes from. The Navy long ago decided that crew members who showered on board ships should get wet, turn off the water, then lather up, and then just turn the water on to rinse off. And that's the reason, because you have to burn fuel to make water. On nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, you can make as much water as you want. There's no problem. So he said, the aircraft carrier pilot said to me, our captain kept an eye on the radar. And any time there was a line of rainstorms, anytime there was a line of squalls, he mustered all 84 F-16s off the deck. All of us were required to fly to the rainstorms, flaps down, landing gear down, and fly through the rain to get our planes washed off. Nature's own fly-through jet fighter car wash. That's why it's fun to be a journalist. When somebody offers you a story, listen to them. The captain's name, I just actually recently uncovered the captain's name, Captain Todd Zekin. What a smart guy. He understood the difference between being surrounded by water and having the right water for the right purpose in the right place. He also understood clearly the value of using all the fresh water you have on hand creatively and imaginatively. And he very clearly understood the value of a gallon of fresh water. For him, a gallon of fresh water was worth more than a gallon of aviation jet fuel. I'm not sure the Pentagon would have agreed with that equation, but it worked for him. He made a very strong impression on his crew. And I think we're all living on that aircraft carrier. Just not always with the smart, thoughtful, creative captain that the Kitty Hawk had. We need the same appreciation and the same awareness and the same creativity as that aircraft carrier captain if we're going to have the water we need in the right place for the right purpose. I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here in the Palouse Valley. I got in Tuesday night. I've spent 2 days meeting all kinds of interesting people. I want to thank Paul Kimmel and John Kimberling, who just sent me an email out of the blue and did a great job of wooing me out here. And they spent all day yesterday introducing me to interesting people and taking me on a tour of this wonderful corner of the world that you all inhabit. It's really been a privilege and great fun. And, of course, I have learned the difference between Moscow and Moscow. Over in Moscow, They're interested in vodka. You guys are interested in water. And it's a great distinction. I've also learned a lot about the aquifers, or as much as you can learn in a couple of days. The Wanampum, I don't think I pronounced that right. I don't put the accent in the right place. The upper one and the Grand Ronde. And I gather that there's this great mystery about how much water there is in the Grand Ronde. There's either 819 more years of water down there or only enough water to last until a week from Saturday. I am going to solve that mystery for you, but you have to stay until the end of the speech. We're going to solve the mystery right before we give away the toilet. Right before we give away the low-flow toilet. So, as Barb Cousins said, I'm a reporter. I'm a journalist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a hydrologist. I am not an environmental scientist of any kind. My journey into the world of water began about 6 years ago. I grew up in Miami, Florida, and God bless my wife, 2 moves ago we lived in Philadelphia. That was just 6 years ago. We moved from Philadelphia to Mexico City, and we now live in Washington, D.C. But when we lived in Philadelphia, we would typically drive home at Christmas to see my parents, pile everybody in the minivan. 6 years ago, we drove from Philly to Miami, and we checked into our hotel, and there was a bottle of Fiji water in the hotel room. It was a liter, and it had this tag around its neck. The tag says, "This bottle of Fiji water is here for your drinking pleasure. If you drink it, $7 will be added to your hotel bill." That's a bottle of water that costs more than a good 6-pack of beer. Has anybody in the room, don't be embarrassed, has anybody in the room not heard of Fiji water? So some people. Okay, so this is a very hip, stylish brand of bottled water. It's famous for its square bottle, for those of you who are not familiar with it. So I had never heard of Fiji water 6 years ago. And I said to the door was not even closed, and my wife had the bottle uncorked and half consumed. She actually believes that the bottle is there for her drinking pleasure as opposed to the economic pleasure of the hotel. I'm clear, however. I said, "Honey, do you think the water in that bottle actually comes from Fiji? And where the heck is Fiji anyway?" Some vague idea of Fiji out there in the Pacific Ocean south of Hawaii, but I wasn't quite clear where. So I threw the bottle in my suitcase and took it home. How many people in the room think the water in the Fiji water bottle does come from the island nation of Fiji? Raise your hand if you think that. How many people in the room have no clue where the water comes from? Okay, a lot of you. How many people are confident the water in the Fiji water bottle comes from the nearest tap that Fiji can fill it up with? Okay, the water in the Fiji water bottle comes to the United States of America from Fiji. And when I got back to my desk with the empty Fiji water bottle, I did some poking around, and I discovered that at that point in Fiji, 53% of the people did not have access to clean, safe drinking water every day. So you could walk into a convenience store or a hotel room in Miami, Florida, or Richmond, Virginia, or Nashville, Tennessee, or Dallas, or Denver, or Moscow, Idaho, where I bought this one today, and you had easier access to clean, safe drinking water from Fiji than the people in Fiji did. And, for a journalist, that actually sounds like a story. What in the world is going on with that? How come in that one hotel room, where the water from Fiji was being sold to us, there were 2 sinks, a shower, and a toilet. So there were 5 water spigots with free water right there. So I did what courageous journalists are always willing to do. I went to Fiji. That is the kind of sacrifice I am willing to make. Fiji, by the way, for those of you who, like me, aren't quite clear on where it was, you fly 6 hours at 500 miles an hour from Philly to L.A., and then you turn left, and you fly 11 more hours at 500 miles an hour. And when you look down, there's Fiji after 17 hours at 500 miles an hour. And I wrote a story about the American obsession with bottled water. About half the people in the room remember a time when you could walk into a grocery store and there was no bottled water. There not only wasn't any bottled water aisle, which is what there is now, there wasn't any bottled water at all, except maybe some club soda in the soda aisle. So I wanted to understand why Americans who have access to the best water system and the best drinking water in the world have suddenly become obsessed with bottled water. I wrote that magazine story, and the response was such that it was clear people were actually interested in water. And so that's why I went on to write a book about water. It's not a book about bottled water. It's a book about water all over the world. And as Barb mentioned, it was a great privilege to travel the world. I did stand at the bottom of a 500,000 gallon wastewater treatment tank. I spent a month in Australia, a country that looks just like the United States economically and socially, even in some ways geographically, and a country that endured a 10-year-long drought that remade the economics and the politics of the whole country. Imagine if the drought in California, which is in year 4, lasted 6 more years. What would California look like? What would the produce department of the grocery stores right here in Moscow and in Pullman look like? What if the Palouse endured a 10-year drought? So I wanted to see what a 10-year drought did to the politics and the economics and the water habits of a country that looked just like the United States. I spent a month in India, a country that has more than enough water for its people and more than enough smart people to get the water to the people, and these days with a relatively booming economy, more than enough money to employ the smart people to get the water to the people who need it, and yet a country in which half the population does not have access to clean, safe drinking water every day. Half the population of India is twice as many people as live in the U.S. 750 million people in India have to struggle every day to get clean water. I wanted to understand how that happens. I stood at the shores of Lake Mead, right where the water met the shore, at a spot where 5 years previously there had been 120 feet of water. So, the ceiling in this room might be 15 feet above my head, 20 feet. 120 feet of water disappeared across a reservoir 110 miles long. That's astonishing. That's what's going on out here in the West. I visited the largest soup factory in the world, the Campbell's Soup Factory in Napoleon, Ohio, a single facility that uses as much water. They use almost as much water as you guys use as a metro region, as a city region every day, as much water as a city of 55,000 people, and only 3% of the water goes in the soup cans. 97% of the water is used for all kinds of things. They cook the soup in the cans in these huge steamers that are 20 stories tall. They also have enormous white pipes running through the factory. And I said, now what's in the pipes? Carrots and potatoes fluming around the factory to get to the soups that they need to get to. Amazing, amazing place. Great fun. I spent a week at the best fountain design company in the world called Wet Design in Burbank, California. 400 people who do nothing all week long but think about our emotional relationship to water and our emotional responses to water and design fountains, including the famous fountain in front of the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And I did do the water walk with a group of women and girls in India to sort of see what it's like to have to carry water on your head. After all those travels, I came to the conclusion that some of the conventional wisdom about water isn't true and might even be getting in the way of us seeing water clearly and solving our water problems. And I think some of this you guys already appreciate, which is great. There is no global water crisis. There may be 1,000 serious water problems in the world. There may be 10,000 serious water problems. But all water problems are local, and you guys are a perfect illustration of that. If you all tackle the water challenges in front of you, misbehavior by people in Seattle or Boise or Denver cannot undo whatever solutions you come up with and put in place. And by the same token, if you all don't get yourselves out of whatever trouble you might get in, even if the people in Denver and Seattle want to help you, there is no way for them to help you. So we hear increasingly about the global water crisis, but the truth is that's just an effort to wake us up. All water problems are happening right where they're happening. And that's the place they need to be tackled. And for me, that's actually good news. The truth is, there really is a global economic crisis. There really is a global healthcare crisis. If everyone in Washington and everyone in Idaho pays their rent and their mortgage and their credit card bills on time, you all can still be victimized by an economic downturn that sweeps through the whole country. If you all tackle your water problems and fix them, no one can undo what you do. And by the way, no one else is going to fix your water problems but you. So to me, that's good news. Business is often way ahead of ordinary citizens and even governments in seeing the water challenges that are coming and in tackling them. I think that's good news because I'm glad somebody is solving water problems. In this community, and I talk about water, I probably talk about water 20 times a year, this is one of the few places where I think you all are ahead of everybody else. And I think that's great. I'm not sorry business is chasing water problems and solutions, but the water belongs to the community. It doesn't belong to any business in particular. So you don't want to let the business community get too far out in front. Free is the wrong price for water. Everywhere you go in the United States, everywhere you go in the world, water is underpriced. It is certainly underpriced in the Palouse Valley. Resources that aren't priced in accord with their value and their availability end up wasted. Most water systems in the United States are wildly undermaintained. There's no innovation, and that's because water is really cheap. Now, we think it should be cheap, but you're not paying for the water. The water's free. It's right down there in the Grand Ronde aquifer. It's delivering the water that costs money. And if we don't price it the way we should, we end up wasting it, and water ends up starved of innovation. California is in the 4th year of a devastating drought. The one thing that hasn't changed in California is the price of the water. And so if you're using water every day, you might not even notice that there's a drought. Raising the price of water everywhere in the world would instantly give us resources and also help solve water problems. Water problems are spreading to all kinds of places in the world, even to places that haven't historically had water problems, like Atlanta, Georgia, like Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. I think we've been living in a golden age of water, 100 years of water that has been unlimited, unthinkingly safe, and essentially free. And I think that era for most of the country, and in fact most of the world, is over. I think we have more than enough water to do what we need to do, but we're going to have to pay more, and we're going to have to use the right water at the right price for the right purpose. We're going to need to move from an era of sort of unlimited water to an era of what I call smart water, and that's what I want to tell you about tonight. I want to send you out of here tonight with 3 things, none of which is a free toilet, because I don't have access to the toilet. I hope I'll give you a little bit of a fresh sense of urgency about water problems and about grabbing hold of your own water challenges here. You are not in crisis, which is great. Partly you're not in crisis. All those strange graphs, what they mean is if you'd continued to use water in this community like you were just 20 years ago, boy, you'd be sucking on air on that straw. You might be. You would have used a lot more of your aquifers than you have now. So you have done a great job, but you aren't done fixing the problem. The second thing is I want to give you a sense of the range of creativity and innovation that other communities are bringing to their water problems just to spark your own ideas. I loved those high school presentations. Those were great. I don't think the high school students are here, but if Audrey's still here, don't call it effluent and people will use it. How you talk about water, call it Fiji water and people will use it. You're laughing. The place that that has been most effective at using reuse water is Singapore, and all of their reuse water is branded by the government, and it is called New Water, Nuwater, New Water. So the language matters. And finally, I want to remind you that you all are the solution. Whether you're students or professors or business people or you're in the water and government infrastructure, only you all can grab hold of the opportunity here in the Palouse Valley to sort of secure your water future. There's nobody else. People say, you know, what do I need to do? Who's going to fix this? You all in the room. That's why you're here. You're here to fix it. So I want to send you out with a sense of both opportunity and also a little sense of obligation. I've heard nice things about the book. That is always lovely. Anybody who's dipped into the book knows that I like numbers as well as stories. So I always start with a few statistics, and I always start with bottled water because that's where I began. In the United States today, we buy 1,250,000,000 bottles of water a week. 1.25 billion bottles of water a week. 4 bottles for every man, woman, and child in the country every single week. If you did not have your 4 yet this week, somebody has had 8. We spend $23 billion a year on bottled water. What's $23 billion a year? Well, here's what it is. We only spend $46 billion maintaining the entire water infrastructure of the country. From Moscow and Pullman all the way to Key West, all the pumps, treatment plants, and pipes get $46 billion, and we spend $23 billion on bottled water. So people often say to me, you know, Charles, water problems are serious, but boy, in the current political and economic environment, there is no money to tackle that. And I say, actually, there's good news. Not only is there money, we are already spending it on water, one crushable plastic container at a time. By the way, as recently as 1950, 1/3 of U.S. homes did not have indoor water service. 40% of the people in the world today drink water every day that is not as clean as the water in our toilets. They would be very happy to drink the water from our toilets. And in fact, more people in the world have cell phones, not cell phone service, they have actual cell phones that have access to clean, safe drinking water. Only 1 billion people struggle through the day without a cell phone. More than 2 billion people either don't have access to clean, safe drinking water or have to walk to get it every day. One of my favorite statistics is a statistic of my own invention. When you're in Las Vegas, where I also spent a month, you can't help but be struck by the presence. I think there are 43 golf courses in Las Vegas. I know there's a somewhat interesting golf course that's come into being here on the other side of the state line in the last few years. I did an analysis of water use by the golf courses in Las Vegas so that I could answer the question, how much water does a single round of golf take? In Las Vegas, one person playing 18 holes of golf uses 2,507 gallons of water. Every time a golfer steps to a tee in Las Vegas, 139 gallons of water were used to prepare that tee for that golfer. A foursome uses more water in 18 holes than a family of 4 uses in a month. And that's not virtual water or imaginary water. That's actual water pumped onto the golf course every night when no one's playing. Weather is changing water availability dramatically. In this country, we like to argue about whether climate change is real. In the places where it's actually happening, nobody debates the reality of it. One of the places I visited in Australia was Perth, a beautiful West Coast city in Australia. It actually sits in about the same position as San Francisco does in terms of the geography of Australia out there on the West Coast. Has the same kind of slightly counterculture feel. Perth has seen its rainfall drop 20% on average over the last 25 years. The amount of water that goes into Perth's reservoirs fell 75% as a result of that. So small changes in rainfall dramatically affect the water available for the cities we've built because we've built our water collection systems really efficiently. And so when there's no rain, there's no water in them. Perth, by the way, is the developed world city to come closest to actually running out of water. 2 million people live in Perth. They had to build a desal plant that cost them $1 billion, and they did it in 2 years. In the United States, we use more water in a day than we use oil in a year. And we use more water in 4 days than the world uses oil in a year. You can, of course, see the price of oil every 18 seconds on CNBC during the trading day. You never hear about the price or the value of water. The good news is, some of the good news was right up here of what you guys have done. In the big picture, the United States, in fact, as a country, uses less water today in 2014 than we did in 1980. We have doubled the size of the economy in that 35 years, and we have cut our water use by about 10%. So we've literally doubled the water productivity of the country, and we've done it without really tackling the question of the length of the showers of teenage boys and girls, frankly. So there is dramatic progress to be made. You don't need to dry out your community or your daily life to make that kind of progress. So what does water innovation look like? What does it mean to have smart water? Let's first go to Salisbury, Australia. Salisbury is a northern suburb of the city of Adelaide. It sits in the state of South Australia. It's right in the middle of the southern coast of Australia. And although Salisbury is a pretty old city in Australian terms, it would be completely familiar to Americans. It's actually beautifully designed, growing quickly, lots of mixed-use developments and in wavy streets with beautiful medians. And it is home to a legendary Australian business called Michelle Wool. I know we have at least one wool farmer. Where's Tom? In the room. There he is, yeah. So Michelle Wool is kind of like Levi Strauss in the culture of Australia. It's a company people know and have regard for. It's not actually a consumer company. It turns out Australia is still the largest producer of wool in the world. There's 9 sheep in Australia for every person. And wool comes off sheep really, really dirty. Here's how dirty. 100 kilograms of Australian wool just sheared yields 55 kilograms of usable wool and 45 kilograms of dirt, plant debris, lanolin, and sheep poop. The sheep, turns out, do not shower that often in the outback. So the first step in handling all that wool in Australia is to clean the wool. That's a whole business. It's called, with good reason, wool scouring. And Michelle Wool is the leading wool scouring company in the country, and that's all they do. They take dirty wool, clean it, and pass it on to the next step, and they're one of the oldest companies in Australia. There's only 2 things in the wool scouring business: water and dirty wool, clean water and dirty wool. So Michelle Wool is still run by the Michelle brothers. They're the grandchildren of the founders, or the great-grandchildren, I think, at this point. They use as much water as 1,000 Australian families. And 3 or 4 years into the drought that lasted a decade, they were getting very nervous. They used potable drinking water, the same water supply as the city of Adelaide, to clean their wool. And they went to the water utility. All the water utilities in Australia tend to be statewide. It's called South Australia Water. And they said, we're a little worried about the drought. We're worried that if the drought continues, we won't be able to compete as a business with the high-tech industries in Adelaide and the rich subdivisions in Adelaide and the universities and the schools and all the rest of the things that need water, and you'll cut us off. And the water utility people said, you are our largest non-farm customer for water in the state. You use $1 million a year of water. Why don't you worry about the wool and we'll worry about the water? And the Michelle brothers, to their credit, actually were not satisfied with that answer. They had, and I'd never heard this phrase before, but I love it, they had what they said to me was water anxiety. Because without water, they had no business. At exactly the same moment, the city of Salisbury was coming under new stormwater rules put in place by the federal government of Australia. They're almost identical to U.S. rules. Salisbury was collecting all its stormwater and sending it in a single pipe right into the Indian Ocean and killing a swath of mangrove along the coast with their genuine effluent. And the federal government of Australia said to Salisbury, you either pay to clean that water or you pay big fines for the damage you're doing. And so the stormwater person for Salisbury and the water supply person for Michelle Wool found each other. It's actually a small town. Even in terms of Pullman and Moscow, it's a small town, 15,000 people. It wasn't hard for them to find each other. And they solved each other's problem. Michelle Wool put up $1 million in capital, and the city of Salisbury designed a series of wetlands, 750 acres of wetlands, 53 interlinked wetlands. They were already collecting their stormwater. Instead of sending it into the ocean, they sent it into the wetlands. took 11 days to flow through the wetlands. And when the stormwater emerged from the wetlands after 11 days, it was more than clean enough to water soccer fields, to be used in commercial nurseries, to flush toilets, to actually wash clothes in, and definitely more than clean enough to clean wool that was 45% dirt. So Salisbury created what amounted to a kind of insurgent water utility using their stormwater as the resource. There's an aquifer under the town. It's not as cool an aquifer as the Grand Ronde aquifer. It's an ordinary limestone aquifer. They take their clean stormwater and store it under there, and they sell it to anybody who wants it. Every new apartment complex and subdivision in Salisbury gets a second plumbing system, a purple pipe system, and in fact, all new toilets are flushed with the purified stormwater. All the spigots on the outside of new homes are purple because they're purple pipe water. Every soccer field, every school building now uses the reuse water. And of course, the biggest customer is Michelle Wool. They've actually essentially cut themselves off from the big water utility pipe, and they clean all their wool in cleaned up stormwater. The town of Salisbury charges 1/3 less than the purified tap water. So Michelle Wool gets water at 1/3 less cost than it had before. There's 5 years of water stored in the aquifer, so they're not nervous about running out, and they're not cleaning filthy wool in purified drinking water. By the way, they were right. They would have had their water use dramatically limited because no one had any idea how long the drought was going to last. But in year 8 or 9 or 10, they would have had their water use limited. Salisbury, for its part, is making a profit of $1.5 million a year on its insurgent water utility. They took something that was a burden and a pain in the neck and about to cost them a lot of money, and they turned it into a profitable business. That's what smart water looks like. Now let's go to Burlington, Vermont, a place that really understands the value of thinking differently about your water. In Burlington, Vermont is an IBM computer chip factory. Every computer chip you've ever encountered in the world is manufactured using a kind of water that exists nowhere in nature. It's called ultra-pure water. The little pathways that send the electrons zinging around computer chips are now so small you can't actually see them under a microscope. The pathways are smaller than the wavelengths of light. But they have to be washed between each layer of new pathways laid down on a chip. And the only thing you can use to wash them is water, but the water has to have absolutely nothing in it except water molecules. So every computer chip factory in the world makes ultra-pure water. At this IBM factory in Burlington, Vermont, there are 90 acres of factory space under roof. 90 acres. The ultra-pure water part of the factory is just 5 acres. 5 acres, by the way, is the size of a very large Walmart. Here's how you make ultra-pure water. You take beautiful Lake Champlain water that you can drink straight out of the lake, straight out of the pipe, utility water, and you reverse osmosis that water. Reverse osmosis is the process we use to turn seawater into drinking water. So you take pretty darn good mountain lake water and reverse osmosis it, and then you do 12 more filtration steps to it. The reverse osmosis is just step 1. And when you're done, then you actually have water that has nothing in it but water molecules. That is a very expensive process. The water processing bill at the IBM factory, $10,590 a day. So 10 years ago, it's nothing compared to what the chips themselves cost. 10 years ago, the water guys, just the water people at the factory said, boy, we love our jobs. We're one of only 2 or 3 chip factories in the whole country. They're putting microchips, my favorite use, in Hallmark greeting cards. That's what greeting cards needed. They needed computer chips. But they're selling the greeting cards for $5 with the computer chips and $3 without the computer chips. That tells you something about the greeting card business. If we're going to stay competitive, we have to help our company reduce the cost of making chips. All we do is water. Why don't we figure out how we can make the water in this factory cheaper and more productive? Even the guys in the water department, the ultra-pure water department, didn't actually know anything about water. They know how to run the equipment. So they did what IBMers do. They gathered data. They put a nervous system on their water system at the plant. They deployed 5,000 sensors. each of which gathers a data point a second. They are gathering 300,000 data points a minute about their water, and they learned a lot about what they do to their water and how they use it. So, for instance, water comes into the plant at 57 degrees. To ultra purify it, you need it warm. So the high-tech water people are warming the water up. At another part of the plant, there are 14 enormous HVAC systems that are cooling water to provide air conditioning to 90 acres under roof. So they're using energy to cool the water, and the high-tech people are using energy to heat it. The high-tech people never talk to the utility water people. I'm sure no one in the room is familiar with that kind of, universities don't have silos like that at all. So the high-tech people went to the utility people, and they said, we're going to send you Lake Champlain water. It's already at 57 degrees. Use it in the air conditioners, and then we're going to plumb it so you send it back to us after you warm it up. And that's exactly what they did. So it goes to the air conditioning people first, then it comes to the high-tech people. They save cooling costs, the high-tech people save heating costs. They did 50 different things like that in the plant. Over the course of 10 years, they reduced their water use by 30%. It's just 3% a year. While chip production increased 30% in the same period of time. They increased the water productivity by 80%. They saved $750,000 a year just on the water bill. They saved almost $4 million a year in additional costs. Energy costs, heating, cooling, filtration, chemical costs. They actually were saving so much water that they went around the plant and resized every water pump because they didn't need to be as big as they had been. For every dollar they saved in water, they saved $4 additional on all kinds of ancillary costs. They discovered this remarkable positive spiral that happens when you start using water more smartly. So that, too, is clearly smart water. All they did was start measuring what they were doing with the water. How smart is it? The folks at IBM headquarters in Armonk, New York, were watching those 35 people in the water division at that one IBM facility. IBM employs 400,000 people. So those 35 people got somebody's attention. There is now an IBM water division, ibm.com/water. The University of Idaho, Washington State University, the city of Pullman, you can hire IBM to come in and do for you, the Campbell Soup Factory in Napoleon, Ohio, to come in and do for you what they did for themselves. And lots of places have done it. Finally, let's briefly visit the city of Las Vegas. Who in the room has been to Las Vegas? Okay, good. A good number of you. When you fly into Las Vegas, if you look out the window, you cannot believe that there is going to be a city down there. You cannot even actually believe that you're still on planet Earth because there's nothing alive below you. There's not even vegetation. It's hard to believe there's going to be anything there. In fact, journalists love this when this happens. It doesn't happen nearly enough. The National Weather Service tracks daily precipitation in 280 cities. Las Vegas is number 280 in annual precipitation. They get 4.5 inches of precipitation a year. It rains or snows 19 days a year in Las Vegas. The temperature is over 100, 72 days a year. And yet, for a city that gets almost no rain, they seem obsessed with water. If you start at one end of the strip, at the south end, the first big casino you come to is called Mandalay Bay. You walk into Mandalay Bay through 30-foot-high waterfalls. Inside is a 1.6 million-gallon shark aquarium. 2 casinos up is New York, New York, which reproduces New York Harbor in kind of miniature out in front of the casino, including the East River, a quarter-size version of the Statue of Liberty, and a New York City fireboat that jets water 24 hours a day into the air. 2 or 3 casinos up from New York, New York is the legendary Bellagio, a beautiful casino. Out in front of the Bellagio is its signature style element, what was until 18 months ago the largest fountain on Earth, an 8.5-acre lake, 22 million gallons of water. When the fountain is running, and if you haven't seen this, it's worth punching it into your smartphone right now, Bellagio fountain on YouTube. It is an incredible performance. The fountain, 8 acres across of jets across the water, dancing to music. When the fountain is running, 17,000 gallons of water are floating in the air. Inside the Bellagio, there's a Cirque du Soleil show named Eau, the French word for water. It takes place in a 2 million gallon water tank as its stage. Next to the Bellagio is the Mirage. The Mirage is one of the older casinos on the Strip, famous for its lagoon out front. Why not? With a volcano in the middle. The volcano erupts once an hour during the day. Once the sun sets, it erupts every 30 minutes. Inside the Mirage is a 2.5 million gallon habitat for 8 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. 3 of the Atlantic bottlenose dolphins were born in captivity at the Mirage. That means there are 3 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins that are natives of Las Vegas, Nevada. The dolphins get 2.5 million gallons of water. The acrobats get 2 million gallons of water, and the sharks are stuck with 1.6 million gallons of water. My favorite water feature in Las Vegas is one very few people stumble on. In the Hard Rock Casino shopping mall is an artificial rainstorm as an attraction for visitors. The artificial rainstorm also goes off once an hour, except on weekends. It goes off every 30 minutes. The Hard Rock Casino shopping mall gets far more rain in a week than the city gets in a year. So that's an incredible display of kind of water opulence and water over-the-topness. And it's particularly incredible not just in a desert city, but all of the water that Las Vegas uses comes from one place, Lake Mead, the place that's down 120 feet in 5 years. And the amount of water that Las Vegas gets to take from Lake Mead, now think about this in your terms, was set in 1935 and has not changed by 1 gallon since then. They don't decide how much water they want. Federal law tells them how much water they can take. It's not that much. Here's how little it is. Lake Mead evaporates twice as much water every day as Las Vegas uses. So how do you go from being a city of 30,000 people to being a city of 2.5 million people without getting 1 new gallon of water? Here's how you do it. The first thing Las Vegas did was hire a brilliant water manager, almost by accident. A woman named Patricia Mulroy was put in charge of water in Las Vegas. The first thing she did, by the way, also relevant to you guys, when she took over in 1984, there were 5 water utilities in the Las Vegas metro area competing with each other to use water as fast as they could. She merged the 5 water utilities into a single entity. And as soon as you have 1 water utility instead of 5, instead of competing, you're thinking about how to use your water smartly. So they hired Patricia Mulroy. Patricia Mulroy looked at the population curves and the water availability curves, and she very quickly concluded that she had taken a job that was a slow-motion disaster, and that Las Vegas had to dramatically change how it thought about water and how it used water if it was going to survive the next 20 or 30 years. So in Las Vegas, they will pay you to take out your lawn, $40,000 an acre, to remove your grass and replace it with appropriate desert landscaping, xeriscaping. They pay golf courses the same $40,000 an acre, and also business parks and shopping centers and anybody. Las Vegas imposes water budgets on those 43 golf courses, and the water budgets are coming down 5% a year. So Las Vegas's golf course managers really understand how to use water smartly and where you need turf and where you don't. Las Vegas specifies the kind of hose nozzle you can use outside. It has to be a trigger nozzle that turns off automatically. It is illegal to let water hit the sidewalk or the road anywhere in the Las Vegas metro area. I think you guys have some similar rules here. Las Vegas has 11 water cops who patrol looking for violators and writing citations, because there's no point in having the rules if you don't enforce them. It's illegal to empty your pool or your hot tub into the storm sewer. Las Vegas wants to recapture every gallon of water back into the system. So even if you have a backyard swimming pool, you have to empty it into the sanitary sewer. Front lawns in Las Vegas are now illegal. As of 2000, no new homes are being built with front lawns. They are all xeriscaped. It's kind of crazy to be trying to grow grass in Las Vegas anyway. And most important, Las Vegas captures and recycles 94% of the water that hits a drain anywhere in the city. There's no American community that even comes close. All that water goes right back into Lake Mead. It's actually cleaner when it goes into Lake Mead than the water they take out of Lake Mead at another spot in another pipe. And that's how they can grow. They get a gallon of credit for every gallon that they put back. So they're just basically, they're not actually using the same water, but they're using the same water allocation over and over again. And how about their habits? How about their water use? Over the course of 15 years, water use in Las Vegas dropped by more than a third per person. In fact, the city grew 50% from 2000 to 2012. They don't use a single gallon more of water today than they used to. Now, in this room, that doesn't seem quite so astonishing because you all have done the same thing over the course of 20 years, which is very, very impressive. So that's smart water. I think of Las Vegas as one of the smartest water cities in the U.S., and I think there are lessons from Las Vegas even for places that aren't dry, like you all. One of the most important lessons is that perception is not always reality. All that display of water is not actually an indication that the people in Las Vegas don't know what they're doing about water. There's so much water innovation going on that it's actually hard to pick stories. I'm going to tick off 8 more examples really quickly for you. Orange County, Florida, where Orlando is located. 30 years ago, they put in place water reuse just for outdoor lawn watering. It's illegal, if your home has been built in the last 30 years, to use potable water on your lawn. They now supply exactly the same amount of water every day, potable and reuse. They've raised a whole generation of people who think it's silly to use purified drinking water to water your azaleas. Google, every time you press enter on a Google search, Google uses 2 tablespoons of water to do that search. Press enter again, another 2 tablespoons. In Atlanta, where water is a big problem, Google became the first company or organization or government, any kind, to put in place a water reuse plant. They recycle the water for their server system in Atlanta before they send it back into the Chattahoochee River. San Antonio, Texas, another really, really smart water community. 10 years ago, put in place a sales tax to protect the aquifer they rely on. They saw huge waves of development coming. And they were worried about 2 things. Where are we going to get the water for all those homes? And those homes are going to destroy the recharge areas for the aquifer that we need to supply the water to those homes. Voters passed a sales tax, 1 penny on $8. You spend a dime if you spend $80. But that tiny little sales tax produces $40 or $50 million a year, which is spent to either buy land outright to protect the aquifer or just buy the conservation rights. Leave the ranches where they are, just buy the conservation rights to land to protect the Edwards Aquifer. Brilliant. The tax was put in place by the voters. It sunsets every 5 or 6 years, and they have renewed it twice. They love it. Ford Motor Company has cut the amount of water it takes to make a car by 50% in 10 years. They were so impressed with the value worldwide of cutting water use per car by 50% that they are in the middle of doing it again. They took the new number, they said we're going to cut it 50%, and we're going to do it in 5 years this time. Absolutely brilliant, really pioneering. Hong Kong uses purified seawater to flush all its toilets. They put that system in place 60 years ago. Boy, are they glad they do it. They use 200 million gallons a day. 200 million gallons a day. I think that's, what is it, 10 times what you guys use, just flushing toilets just from the ocean. Boy, are they glad they do it that way. UNC Chapel Hill, a big state university, after a devastating drought that put enormous pressure on UNC's water use, they have in the last 10 years cut their water use 40% per square foot of building space. Really, really brilliant, and I love that measurement, by the way. Water use per square foot of facility. Minneapolis is ripping out its curbs so that stormwater runs off the road onto beautiful green swards. It takes a little bit of work to take the curb out and make sure there's some kind of absorbent landscape adjacent to the road. But they do a beautiful job, takes enormous pressure off their stormwater system, and they're putting the water back in the ground where it belongs, in the state of 10,000 lakes. Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines has replaced the ice on its all-day buffets on all of its ships with chilled river rock. They actually unplugged an ice machine that ran 24 hours a day on every one of those ships when they replaced the ice with river rock. They don't have to make the ice. On a cruise ship, you make ice exactly the same way you do on an aircraft carrier. You burn diesel fuel to make the water, to make the power, to make the ice, and then you burn a little more diesel fuel to clean the water before you release it. They save 3 million gallons of water a year by replacing the ice with river rock. What connects all these people, the aircraft carrier, the Ford Motor Company, the Google servers, the river rock on the cruise ships, is that people took a step back and thought about what they were using the water for and whether they were using it smartly. In some cases, all they did was start measuring. What are we using? How much are we using? What do we do to it? How could we do that more smartly? So that's why I think you guys are sort of on the right path. The other thing that all those people did, and this is, I think, an important lesson for you all, is that they saw their water situation clearly. Water does not respond to wishful thinking. You have to be realistic about whatever situation you're in. It's not hard to solve water problems if you're thinking ahead. It's very hard and very expensive to solve water problems once they become a crisis. I think you all in this community are great water innovators too. I loved the example of the water forum in Marseille wanting to understand how you all have done what you've done. If you just look at the metro area of Atlanta, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida have been fighting for 30 years in federal court vigorously over how to share water. You guys 20 years ago said, you know what? We share the resource. Let's figure out how to share responsibility and conversation about it. And so I think that's truly brilliant. The Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee should be, in fact, a model for other people, even people who don't have a state line running down the middle of their community. And of course, 21 years ago, you set water goals. You gave yourself water goals. You didn't impose them, and you've actually met them. You've done better than meet them. You're down 15% in 21 years, while the population is up 20%, and I guarantee you the economy is up between 50 and 75%. You all, too, have doubled the productivity of your water in the last 21 years. So if I had found you guys when I was writing the book, you well might have been a chapter. You guys are water innovators. So you all are an example of what smart water looks like, too. And I think, by the way, a lot of credit is due to the public officials and the elected officials. Atlanta, and I hate to keep coming back to Atlanta, the Atlanta metro region has absolutely abysmal water planning, and one reason is because they have 53 water utilities. They not only don't share responsibility, they compete with each other. My job as a water manager in Atlanta is to pump faster than Barb. And if Barb runs out of water, that's Barb's problem, but my job is to get water for my people. And so thinking about water in systemic terms, where is the water, who's using it, is hugely important. It's actually how you manage it smartly. So I told you I was going to solve the mystery of the Grand Ronde aquifer and how much water is down there. And here's the answer. It doesn't matter how much water's there. It doesn't matter because you all, despite all the work you've done, are not ready for the future. Whether the Grand Ronde runs out in 819 years or a week from Saturday, you all aren't ready. You don't have another place to get your water, but you do have more than enough water. So I think you all need to take the next step. You've got all of the structures in place to think smartly about how to give yourself a second and or a third source of water. You all should have much more reuse in this community. There's no reason not to. You might need to tap the Palouse River. You might need to collect the spring runoff in a smart way. Should you put it in a reservoir? Should you tap the river and put it right in the water system and take pressure off the aquifer? Should you do aquifer recharge? I love aquifer recharge. But that's just my pet thing. By the way, San Antonio, the folks with the aquifer protection sales tax, they do aquifer storage. When it rains really hard in Texas, they gather that water and clean it and put it in their aquifer. You can do it carefully. You don't have to worry about polluting your aquifer. So you've got the framework and you've got the water. you need to have a great, and I would say urgent, conversation about what the next step is, and take the leap. Take the next water innovation step, which is to give yourself a second source of water. I've heard people call it an alternative source of water, but I think you should think of it as a second source of water. There's no reason not to have two. We have 2 American cities this year, 2 big American cities, Charleston, West Virginia, and Toledo, Ohio, that had to turn off their tap water systems because they got in trouble. They had contamination. If you guys had a problem, you wouldn't have a second source of water. So there's all kinds of reasons to do it. I love this report. I go lots of places where I have to go digging for data. This is really a remarkable public document every year and a great asset. In here somewhere there's something about setting goals for a water use plan for 2025. And I would just say 2025 is ridiculous. Set your water goals and your water use plan for 2015 and then run a year late. But don't wait 10 years. You don't have 10 years. The water situation could change dramatically between now and 10 years from now. One of the people I met yesterday was a very smart young person, a PhD. And that person said to me, sometimes I actually feel bad taking a shower or flushing the toilet or doing the dishes with Grand Ronde water. It's been down there 40,000 years. It's kind of fossil water. Makes me feel bad. And I was actually quite struck by that, but only for a moment. And then I thought, that's a very touching way to think about the Grand Ronde Aquifer, but we don't need to be sentimental about water. We need to be practical about it, and we also need to be respectful of it. But here's what I think is important about that. I'm optimistic. I can't help but be optimistic about you all because you've done so much, and in some ways, the structure and the conversation is actually the hard part. You can figure out the water part in a pretty straightforward fashion. But I'm optimistic because everywhere I went, people are doing what you all have done, which is that they're grabbing hold of their water problems and solving them. And I want to finish tonight by talking about one of the qualities of water that hasn't been mentioned at all in 3 hours of sitting here, not even by the kids. But it was really important element for me of water, and it's actually an important element of water for you. And that is that water is just great fun. It's really magical stuff. When you think about how we enjoy ourselves when we're not working, swimming, skiing, snowmobiling, fishing, sailing, all of those things are water-based activities. Americans have a tendency to go right to water when they vacation. We have a really strong emotional connection to water. And you all know that. Everybody in the room knows what it's like to have a long, hard day, step under a hot shower, and feel that instant sense of relaxation. We all know what it's like to see our kids race for the swimming pool or the lake or the seashore in August. Anybody who's ever given a 2-year-old a bath knows you do not have to teach kids to revel in the playfulness of water. And I don't think that emotional relationship is beside the point. I think it's actually right at the heart of the point, the person I talked to yesterday who feels bad about the Grand Ronde and about all of us. We have a powerful emotional connection to water. We don't have any emotional connection to the idea of fossil fuel independence or a system of carbon credits. Those may be really important concepts. They may be really important things we need, but we don't feel them in our gut. We clearly did not have nearly enough of an emotional connection to mortgage-backed securities. But we actually do love water, and we do appreciate water. And if we can tap that, if you all can tap that connection, I think that will really help you make smart, thoughtful decisions that will make sure there's enough water for the whole Palouse Valley forever. And that's how long you need the water to last. Thank you all very, very much. We are well over time, but I will be happy to take a couple of questions. And I'll also, if you buy a book, I will be happy to sign a book, or if you already own a book, I'll go out in the hall afterwards and get out of the way and do that. So is there a question or two? Yes, ma'am. You know, Right. There's all kinds of stuff going into water that wasn't going in 40 and 50 years ago. I take Lipitor every day, which means, ladies and gentlemen, that I pee Lipitor every day. 50 years ago, there were almost no maintenance drugs. Today, 25 or 30% of American adults take some kind of medicine every day. If you look in the shower, where my wife showers and my daughter showers, I believe in each case there's 400 important hair products in there. When I was growing up in my shower at home, and I had a sister, there was Johnson's baby shampoo. Maybe there was conditioner. All that stuff ends up in the water too. This is the 40th anniversary this year of the Clean Water Act. Last year was the 40th anniversary. Last year was the 40th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. This is the 40th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Those federal laws have done an incredible job of improving the quality of water in the environment in this country. Every single body of water, almost without exception, in the country is in better shape than it was 40 years ago. And they've done an incredible job securing the quality of drinking water. But they are both out of date. And we need to modernize them in dramatic ways. And I think you mentioned nanometals. There's all kinds of things to worry about. And no, the amount of Lipitor that I pee, the amount of Tylenol that I pee is not significant. What's significant is that we all do, and it never comes out of the water supply because wastewater treatment plants are not set up to remove molecules of those scale. You know, when the Model T was invented, I don't think anyone imagined that what was coming out of the engine of the Model T would change the atmosphere of the entire planet. But actually, we discovered that it did. And so I agree with you in the sense that it is time to work on that problem. One of the most important ways to work on it may be to work with the manufacturers of those products and not let the stuff into the water supply in the first place. You can take anything you want out of water. Cleaning water is not a problem at all. The water at the Fukushima nuclear reactor can be turned into drinking water. It wouldn't even take very long. The question is what it costs, not whether you can do it. And so it is often cheaper. In our house, we have all those cleaning products have microbeads in them, dermabrasion or whatever it's called, right? And actually, some of the big consumer products companies, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, have agreed to take the plastic microbeads in my daughter's Neutrogena face scrub out so that they don't pile up in the Great Lakes. But it's much smarter to talk to Johnson & Johnson than it is to filter out the microbeads, which would require retrofitting the entire water system of the country. So it's a really important issue, and I think it's something you need to tackle in a bunch of different ways. I think our wastewater needs to be cleaner when we cut it loose. 40 years ago, we were putting raw sewage in the Mississippi River, so we've come a long way. But we are really happy that those people 40 years ago had the courage to do something smart, and it may be our turn to step up and do the same kind of thing so that 40 years from now we're happy with our water supply. Okay, one more quick question, or are we done? You guys can't wait to get your toilet. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it.